I've been so busy with artwork that I need notes this time. But I am, right now I'm doing 6 different shows and exhibitions between Columbus and Dayton. So I'm like really exhausted but excited by it too, because it's just fun to get out that much. But I do appreciate everybody taking some time out of the day to come and see. And if my voice gets lower, let me know, because sometimes I do that. And so my talk's will be about 15-20 minutes or so, or until my sister Michelle waves me on to shut up.
And I will do that.
Yeah. So I think just about everybody knows, I have an art studio at Front Street, and which is in outside of downtown Dayton. It's on off of Kiowee and 3rd, and I noticed a couple that probably haven't been there, but I do recommend that you going there to see it, because we just counted 150 artists in there.
Wow.
Yeah, and so some are part-time, and there's others like myself that are full-time. And there's been boutiques that have opened up, so there's a lot to see. I mean, it's primarily art, but there's so many other things to see there. So definitely, come, or if you have out-of-town guests, bring them down to Front Street too, because it's a really neat place to go. And we've gotten more and more people coming from Cincinnati, Columbus, and Indianapolis on First Fridays, which is really neat to see. Yeah, it really is. So typically when I do a talk, it's always been about the business of art. And I started doing this talk a few years ago, and the reason for that was because I saw that most artists don't have any concept of the business of artwork or marketing and whatnot. So I started doing that first for Dayton Society of Artists, and then I would do it for different arts organizations, groups of artists, and then it went to high schools. And now I get asked semi-regularly to do it at colleges and universities around the U.S., primarily through the Midwest, but every now and then somebody pops up and asks me to do that. So this talk, though, is going to be about a part of my journey in the almost 6 years I've been back in artwork. So as some may know, I was heavily involved in art, or different phases of art, for like the first 30 years of my life. And then I met the Macintosh computer, and art went out the door. So I was involved in technology, and I had, with a business partner, a company where we developed software for automated workflows. So unfortunately, we were one of the groups of people that laid off a lot of people because they were doing their jobs manually, and our software, good or bad, was able to do it quicker for them and whatnot. So that's what I talk about, that's what I did, but moving into 6 years, it'll be 6 years this February, is how long I've been at Front Street now. And when I came back into artwork, I think because of my work in technology and just my personality, I was so precise. Don't shake your head. So precise and extremely organized, and logical thought. I mean, it was just really, my mouth is getting dry. It was really how an engineer or somebody would be. And I was a Windows NT systems engineer at one time too in my life. So when I started at Front Street, I had a little space Mike Elsall gave me. It was like 4 by 8 feet, and I loved it. I just was like, I couldn't believe I had all that space to do artwork. And I did my artwork for about 6 weeks or so, and I was painting with oil, which is my favorite medium to use, and I was doing representational or realistic work. And a lot of the first birds that I did were realistic work, and I was sitting there and I was so precise with everything, with every detail. I was using these tiny brushes and whatnot, and it dawned on me, this isn't going to work. I was still being the left side of the brain type of person by trying to make everything, so perfect. So being around some of the other artists at Front Street who do a lot of abstract, I started loosening up my brush strokes, and I found out that it's something that I really enjoyed. And one time the first time I ever spoke, I was speaking in front of 1,500 people, and I was doing really well because I was really prepared. And 2 people walked in, and my mind went blank. But I'm better at it now. I can tell stories about it. So as I continued in art, like I said, I started loosening up my brush strokes, and I started noticing, which was absolutely amazing to me, that things began to affect me differently, where I was more emotional about things. Again, you could ask Michelle, because but I was more emotional about things, and I learned to be more expressive. I've always been kind of an introvert, private person. So, it was the artwork I was doing that was kind of bringing that out in me. And it's I'm sure it's that the right side of my brain, which is the emotional side and whatnot, I think started being used more, of course, rather than what the business side was. And I've always read that, and I knew that that was, what scientists and whatnot said, but I actually have experienced that, and it's kind of hard to describe if you haven't been through that, but it's almost not like a second personality, but it brings more of your personality out, I guess. And it's just been so interesting for me to see that side of myself, to have feelings the way I do when I paint or use a brush in a certain way. So I've said in my artist statement that I always make purposeful brush strokes, and I still do, even though my brush strokes have been loosened. But they're still purposeful because I'm careful not to just slap down paint on canvas or whatever. I want everything to be there for a reason. And also, another reason I did it, which this is something that I've talked about in my business and art talks, is because the market, which are the people that are coming in to look at artwork, they're not looking at representational work today. They want abstract work. So I did purposely begin to do more abstract, and when I say abstract, I'm taking any genre of work in that area, whether it's impressionist, expressionist, whatever, and just calling it abstract for simplicity's sake. But that's what sells well. And because this is my sole income, I have to make sure that that's the type of work that I'm doing. I do get commissions, quite a few commissions, and a lot of times people will ask that I do them in oil and that it is representational work, which I love doing that. But, as I was saying, as I found myself doing more abstract, using palette knife, kind of, adding a lot of mediums and texture to my paintings and whatnot, I found myself getting deeper into my art emotionally. And it's where, for me, like complex colors that complemented each other became more important. I know, red and green go together, blue and orange go together, you know. That's good, you know.
She knows the answer. You're straight A student.
I know. So next time, raise your hand. But it started to be more than just that. A shade of green became important to me, and that's what I was talking about earlier, that when I mix my colors, I write down the recipe, the brand of paint that I was using and whatnot, because when I get a color a specific way, it's very important to me that I'm able to get back to that color, and that it's a color that really adds a lot to a painting that I may be doing in the future. And that's all very important. But I see artwork. I'm a little nervous, but mostly I'm not taking a pill that makes me thirsty. And it does other side effects, but I'm not going to tell you. But
Is it any fun?
no. No.
Don't sit down. If it lasts longer than 4 hours, she has to call her doctor.
Yeah. Sorry. That was pretty good. That was good. So now, today, maybe it started a year and a half, 2 years ago probably or so, that when I paint, I normally paint with music on. Before when I painted, I would paint with a podcast on or an audio book or something like that, but now it's either dramatic classical music or old gospel, which I absolutely love that, and Broadway music. I love it. If I could sing and dance, I would be on Broadway, but I can't do either. So I'm an artist. But that music helps pull me in to the piece of artwork while I'm listening to it and painting it. And of course, if many of you are artists, you know that when you're using like a palette knife and the music's getting stronger and louder, you start putting that paint on, like you're the conductor of the music. And it just becomes emotional. You get, I can't say I get an attachment to paintings this way, but it's emotional and almost an attachment to the way a color is laid down or a shape is put in, or even texture. Texture, obviously, when you see my work, is very important to me. I like being able to see the texture and to touch it, and I let anybody touch my paintings. You can't have work with that much texture in it and think people are just going to walk by without touching it. So I invite them to touch it. It's those round paintings I have there with thick paint, their titles are just that. One is, I know you want to touch me. The other one is tempted yet. And then the third one is, it's okay, you can touch me. Because everybody wants to do that so badly. So one thing that I've learned, which I think is important, is that creativity doesn't have an expiration date. Because you're of a certain age, it doesn't mean you have to stop creating. It doesn't mean if you haven't created, in my case it was 30 years, I guess, about 30 years I hadn't created anything, you can start again. And I have kids in college and graduates of college who have majored in art or majoring in art, and they say, well, instead of sculpting, I would love to paint, but I've gone through school and I'm 27 years old now and I can't do it. So of course I have to tell them, well, I've been doing this again since I was 57 is when I started back, and you can do it again. And it's important that all ages, particularly as we get older, because a lot of times I think people tend to stop doing things for whatever reasons, but it's important to continue, particularly with the arts, to do something, because it brightens up the day. And another thing that I have learned is that as an artist, or even if you're not an artist, I guess, that perfectionism doesn't matter. It's almost a blessing that you can be imperfect with something, whether it's a painting or something that you've done in your life. Imperfection is a good thing too, and sometimes you're surprised by what comes from it. It was always important to me to be perfect in many ways, and not to have mistakes. And now if I do a painting and something doesn't go the way I want it to, now if it's bad, I remove it, of course. But sometimes too, you look at it and you can see that it formed a perfect shape or color or whatever, and it will add to the painting. So it's okay to make mistakes, and it's really not a bad thing. And that was a big thing for me to learn. And I really appreciate art, and that I was able to learn that, because it makes your life less stressful, I'll tell you. So I think right now, people that see my art, there's different techniques I'm using. Again, most of this would be considered expressionism. In the future, which is, already, because I've kind of started it, I want to start working on series that are social issues. Some things are important to me to get that across. And the first one that I'm going to start is on mental illness. And the reason for that is because my dad was severely mentally ill. And I want to discuss through paintings how the relationship between a child and their mentally ill parent evolves or doesn't evolve. And not just for that reason, but also because although it's gotten much better, there's still a stigma of mental illness. And when my dad, back in the 60s, 70s and that, when he was having his some bad problems, wasn't spoken about. Nobody spoke about it. So to me, it's important to let people know that this guy who looks really nice and was a nice person and is friendly has these terrible mental illnesses going on, and not to shun them. This just kind of a side note, my dad did make serious suicide attempts, and the first one, we were young, but family members and friends shunned our whole family because of that. And I think it was about 6 months ago, I was talking with somebody, and the same kind of statements I heard back then when I was a kid were being said 6 months ago. So it's important that people understand more about mental health and how it affects people, and it's an illness, So that's my first social issue I'm going to do. Another one I want to do is, some of you know, I usually take one international missions trip a year, and we go to second and third world countries. And when I'm hearing how the United States is working, which things are going bad, but when you compare that with what I've seen in these countries, with what people are complaining about, there is no comparison. But I want to work with kids in my paintings, because that's typically who I work with when I go into these other countries. And just to hopefully open up Americans' eyes who never get to see that, as 90-some% of Americans never leave the U.S. And I think everybody should, because I don't care where you go, it's not the U.S. I mean, it's not. So that's kind of as far as the emotions and whatnot in painting and getting more into painting. I've gone from someone who was doing it strictly for business. I mean, after I did it for about 2 months, strictly for business, although I loved what I was doing and whatnot, but I've really become part of the paintings and have, emotional attachments to them, which, when I would read about that or people would tell me about that, back in the day, I'd be like, yeah, right. But it does happen. I mean, it's just amazing. I've painted things where I tear up. Somebody contacted me to do a painting of her husband's hand holding his mother's hand as she was dying. And of course, I thought about my own mom too, so I mean, I know that entered into it. But I just was really in that painting. And again, it's just so hard to describe. But it's interesting, again, at my age, that my feelings, my thinking, my personality, more so inside personality, can change so much. So I could talk about my journey for like hours and hours because there's so much to it, so many great things has happened. Since I've become an artist, I've made so many wonderful friends. It's just absolutely amazing. But I just want to give you a little bit of idea of what's happened these past 6 years, and when I'm back here in 6 years, I'll tell you about the next 6 at Front Street. So again, thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. I do have to say one more thing. I had planned to say this and I forgot. This is my sister Michelle here, and next to her is my brother-in-law Scott, and they have helped me tremendously these past 6 years. I mean, coming in and building shelves for me, or running somewhere to get something I've forgotten, or making a delivery, or setting it, so much. I mean, constantly. So I really appreciate so much all of those guys. I know. It is.
Yeah, we're used to seeing it.
Yeah, it is.
Sure.
So do you take questions?
I'll take them,
I
but I
wanna
have to
know.
think about answering them.
You have to answer this. So what art do you have in your house? And do you have any of your own pieces in your house that you are attached to? Or
Well,
I often wonder that about artists. What do they have in their own house? Michelle can answer if you want.
no, she can't. Now this has a little story. I'm not known for making change in my house. I've lived there.
True stories like
Yes,
this.
I've lived there going on 33 years, and other than if Michelle's come to move a chair, everything's in right. But I've sold all my artwork. I don't have any pieces.
I know. I'm on your wait list.
I know. It's incredible. But I do have a lot of art from other local artists, and I do have plans to hang it up. My chairs aren't going to move again.
Oh, you haven't hung it up.
I haven't hung it up. But what I do...
We'll be over.
Yeah, he'll do it. But what I do is when I sell a painting, I take 10% of that sale and put it aside, and then I use that money to buy art from other local artists, because I like to share in that, because I absolutely have been so blessed these 6 years. I mean, things that have happened to me in this short period of time should not happen to an artist. It's just, I've been so blessed to be so successful already.
Might be Tim, but I'm not sure.
Well, I don't know, but it's just, so, that's, so I do have all kinds of artwork at home,
That's
just
right.
not on the walls yet. So,
It's not
I was
gonna
just
run
curious.
away. It's not gonna run away and say, yeah, you didn't hang me, I'm leaving.
exactly. Well, I have a feeling I'm gonna get 2 visitors this
Real
winter
soon,
who might.
real soon.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm someplace really prominent, would you please?
Absolutely.
I have, it's sitting on, well, it's leaning on the floor. It's on the floor in my living room.
That's okay, yours is on a stand on a bookshelf. So
Oh, cool.
we're even.
Thanks. So, does anybody else have questions? I didn't even think to ask.
That's all I want to know.
Okay, So I do, but it's not up. Plus I have plaster walls, you know. it's not
Yeah, I
bad.
know exactly. Hey,
Yeah.
but in my old house, we had a chair rail up in the house. You could hang things and take them down and switch them out. Because we had plaster
You would
walls.
know how to do that.
We lived in a Sears kitchen, so that's what you want to do.
Next
is you
assignment,
gotta-
noted.
That way you could change things out, you could change the height.
Yeah.
And
I
they have
didn't even think
wonderful,
about doing
and they have
that.
wonderful
Great idea.
picture
Yeah.
wires
Wow.
with like little things that you can hang with. So it adds a lot of character. They're tiny gold chains, they're really
Oh.
cool ways to hang, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, Richard did it, he created that.
That's a great idea.
Have a hang your artwork.
It's kind of why I was more comfortable.
Exactly.
But it'd be nice to be able, because I like to change things around, so I used to do that.
Sure.
That's great.
That's good. I still have my 33-year-old wallpaper. in my bedroom.
And it looks great.
It does. Well, I fix it, I go through and make sure it's all correct. Yeah. Yes.
What is the hardest work you've ever had to do as an artist?
The hardest work? Like you mean because it was
Challenging, emotionally upsetting,
challenging?
you couldn't mix the colors, you didn't like it, you wanted to hit the person who bought it.
I think, okay, emotionally, it would be the man holding his mother's hand.
Oh, behind you.
Right there.
Oh, that-
Yeah. Oh, that was wild. Yeah, popped
Yeah.
up right when she said that.
So emotionally, it was that. The one that was the most frustrating to me was I was asked to paint a horse. Don't ever ask me to paint a horse because I'm not going to do it anymore. But I was asked to paint a horse, but this horse had one blue eye and one brown eye, and I forget, there's some sort of a deformity on it, and they wanted the painting to look just like the horse. So if you didn't see the horse, the painting didn't look well. It didn't look very good, but after I was finished with it, they asked me if I would change the color so it would match their living room. And the answer to that was no. So,
Change your living room to match my painting.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, so it's like, so, but yeah, the more difficult they are, the more I really get into it. I love the more
That's
difficult.
why we're friends, baby.
That's
Are
right.
you,
And you learned from each of those too. I remember that. That
Oh,
was a
yeah.
while ago, and you've since grown professionally or business-wise.
But I still won't do
You take
horses.
every one.
but you'll do the subjective where I say, like, find an interesting corner of
Versus
I mean, is that something that's okay?
It's mutual.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I have photographed and looked at probably every part of Front
How
Street.
fun.
Yeah, I've really been
I
checking it
commissioned
out.
her for Richard as a surprise to do something about Front Street, but some interesting corner or what she sees, her eye. Something that,
Oh, I want to
yeah,
see
not
that.
like, you know.
So
Before you
is
give it
it
to
Richard's
Carol, I wanna
butt
see
bent
it.
over the canoe outside your window?
He is in that canoe quite a bit.
I will say,
I haven't been there that often, and I've seen it at least 3 times.
I do
Loves
see
his
that.
fish.
out my window a lot, but
He looks like a pervert staring in, but he's looking at the fish.
if you walk past, Richard is the owner and property manager of Front Street, but
Mechanic,
he does everything.
everything.
Yes.
But if he's looking at his fish and you walk by, he won't even hear you or see you. He's just. he
Yeah,
really
it's
loves
not
it.
rudeness.
He doesn't raise his head up. You say, hi, Richard, he goes, hi, but he doesn't stop
He's
looking
just
at
doing
the
what,
fish.
yeah.
Oh, it's interesting. We have a visiting artist from Liberia.
He was just there, I just saw him.
Yeah, I saw him yesterday.
Patrick.
He's got a studio at Front Street
He's
for
all
the
grown
next
up now, he's
month.
31.
Yeah. But yesterday I think it was, I was coming or going out of my studio and he was looking at the canoe, which has koi fish in it and in water. And he goes, are those koi fish? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, I've never seen koi fish before. He was so excited.
That's where he was today, he was standing over the fish.
Well, he's going to paint it.
Oh.
He wants to do some paintings of it. But he was so excited to see koi
There you
fish.
go, Cheryl. There's
And that was really
right
neat,
there.
you know.
Yeah.
You know, he said, because I didn't know that
He's
koi
got two
fish
big
in the
cameras
U.S.
in there.
But, you know, Liberia, you know, because it's such a poor nation,
Yeah.
wouldn't. So, well, if there's some little appetizers here, if anybody wants to
That's
help
fascinating.
themselves.